This is video number 1 in how to harmonize a melody. In this video, we're going to write a simple melody, and then we're going to add a bass line and Roman numerals to it. Then in a following video, I'll show you how to add 2 inner voices to complete a short, harmonized melody. So first thing we have to do, we have to write a simple melody. In Chapter 5 of your textbook, there are a lot of very simple, very good rules to follow for creating a simple melody. I have them here summarized. If you want to pause the video and look through them now, feel free. Alright, but I've gone ahead and composed a melody in advance that follows all of these rules. So I've chosen to write my melody in 3/4 time in the key of G minor. You'll notice all of my note durations are equal to or longer than a beat. So they're all quarter notes or longer. So I have some half notes here. I end on a dotted half note. The final note lands on a strong beat. It lands on beat 1. If you're writing this in 4/4, you can end your melody on either beat 1 or beat 3. Kind of an unwritten rule that you might want to follow. I've ended on the tonic note, and I've approached that tonic note by step. That's a good trick that you can use for writing an effective melody that will be easier to harmonize. So try to end on a strong beat and also end on the tonic pitch and approach it by step. I've approached from below, from the leading tone. You could also approach it from above, so from the supertonic, from an A in this case. Either way works. My contour should be mostly conjunct, and you'll notice there's a lot of steps, and there's a few leaps here. I have a leap up here, a leap down there, a leap down there, but for the most part, it's mostly conjunct. It should be clear and simple, but not too uninteresting, so it has a nice shape to it. It's maybe not the best melody in the world, but it's not something simple like just going straight up and back down. It has a few twists and turns, some curves there. Your contour should have a single focal point or high note. So my highest note is an E flat. I don't have any other E flats, so I have a single focal point. All of my leaps, you want to avoid any augmented intervals or leaps of a seventh or anything bigger than a perfect octave. And I do that. My leaps don't have any awkward intervals or anything like that. Leaps bigger than a perfect fourth are best approached and left in opposite directions of the leap. Here I have a leap of a perfect fourth, but I don't have any leaps larger than a perfect fourth. Consecutive leaps should outline a triad. I also don't have any consecutive leaps. So here's a leap, but it's on either side has steps. This leap on either side has steps, so I don't have to worry about that. And then tendency tones. Right now, the only tendency tone we need to be worried about is the leading tone. And the leading tone resolves to tonic. So here's my leading tone in the key of G minor, F sharp, and it resolves to tonic. So I have a good, effective melody. Now that we have a good, effective melody, the next step for each of these melody notes, we want to write down all possible Roman numerals, or chords in the key that have the melody note in them. So a good idea is to start by writing out a scale. Here I've written my G harmonic minor scale, and then make all of the possible diatonic triads in that key. So I've taken my scale, and stacked on top of it, I've made chords. So I have my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and my 1 chord. And this makes it really easy to see what all the different notes are in each chord. So for my first note, a B flat, I want to write down all the possible chords that this could be. So all the chords that have a B flat in them. So my 1 chord has a B flat in it, so I could harmonize this with a 1 chord. The 3 chord also has a B flat in it, so I could harmonize this first melody note with a 3 chord. My 6 chord also has a B flat in it, so I could harmonize this with a 6 chord. So we're just going to write down all of the possibilities for each note. So for example, this E flat. Let's look at possibilities for E flat. So my 2 chord has an E flat in it. So the 2 diminished chord is a possibility. My 4 chord is a possibility. My 6 chord is a possibility. So we go through each note and do that. I'm going to do that on my own off video right now. Through the magic of editing, we'll come back and we'll see all the possibilities for each and every single note. Alright, so I've gone ahead and added all of the possibilities for each and every melody note. So my B flat could be a 1, 3, or 6, or this F sharp over here. The 5 chord or the 7 chord both have F sharp in it. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose my chord progression. So now that I have all of these possibilities, I'm going to make a chord progression that makes sense. So I might, for example, start on a 1 chord, and then I want to always be thinking ahead about what could come next. So for example, if I have a 1 chord here, maybe I could go to the 6, but then if I went to the 6 chord, all of these possibilities are not super great. Like for example, 6 chord, the 6 chord doesn't like to go to the 5 chord, so the 6 chord is maybe not the best choice, but maybe I could do a 4 chord, then a 5 chord. 5 chords really like to go to 1, but they could go to 6. If I have a 5 chord here, I definitely don't want to go to a 3 chord. So a 5 chord doesn't go to 3, but I have my option of 1 or 6. I think I'll do a little deceptive motion. Maybe a 6 here. Keep in mind also that I can always change this. If I find myself writing myself into a corner, I can always back up. Nothing's ever written in stone. Don't erase the other possibilities. You might want to go back and change which chord progression you're doing once we start writing the bass line. Let's do a 6, maybe a 2. 6 likes to go to 2. Let's see. See, now I've kind of written myself into a corner, so maybe the 2 chord isn't the best possibility. Maybe instead I'll back all the way up and go to a 1 chord, then maybe a 5, 1, 5, 5, 1. Nothing wrong with that, keeping it simple. Alright, so now that I have a chord progression that makes sense, that follows all of the chord progression rules that we've talked about in class, we're going to write a bass line that follows this chord progression and has good counterpoint with the melody. Good counterpoint means that we're not going to have any part writing errors, so we're going to try to avoid parallel perfect fifths or parallel octaves. Another part of good counterpoint is trying to have contrary motion whenever we can. We don't have to have just contrary motion, but the more contrary motion that we have, the better our piece will ultimately be. The more separate our melody and our bass line will sound. We want these to sound like independent voices. So if the melody goes up, I want to try to have a bass line that goes down. While we're doing this, remember that you can use root position chords. You can also use first inversion chords pretty much anywhere where you could use a root position chord. If we have any diminished chords, we have to use that in first inversion. So let's just try to write a bass line real quick that has good counterpoint. So let's start with maybe a root position 1 chord here. So I'll have the bass voice there, and then the melody's going up, so it would be nice to have the bass line going down. I don't have to have the bass line going down, but it's nice if I can have some contrary motion. So my 4 chord is a C minor chord. If I used it in root position, I could use a C, or first inversion, I could use an E flat. We also want to keep in mind our doubling rules. So minor chords, I have the 3rd in the melody here. Let's see, I could go either way. I think I'll use a root position. So I'll use a root position, 4 chord, my 5 chord here, my melody's going down. So maybe my bass line could go up, so I use another root position, 5, maybe continuing that. So if I'm going to a 1 chord here, so the root position there, our next chord, a 5. Here's a neat trick. So you don't have to have the same rhythm in both the melody and bass line. In fact, it can be a good thing to mix it up a little bit. So maybe I could make this a quarter note, and then I can stay on a 1 chord. But I could do root position and use this lower octave there. So then when I go to the 5, I could do that. Or if I wanted to do something different, I could go to a 1 in first inversion. That would be nice. So now I'm on my 5 chord to a 1 chord. Let's go to first inversion again, maybe. Yeah, let's do a first inversion chord. Or I could decide at this point, nah, first inversion. 1, 6. To a 5. And since I'm holding over this 5, let's just make this a half note. So 5, and then 1. So what I did, I picked a chord progression that made sense, and then I, for the sake of variety, chose to use a couple of inversions. Anywhere where my melody was going down, I tried to have my bass voice going up. Anywhere where the melody was going up, I tried to have the bass voice going down. So that's contrary motion. Lots of contrary motion is very good. So now we have a good melody, and we have a bass line that complements that melody. It has a chord progression that makes sense, and it has lots of contrary motion with the melody. In the next video, we'll look at how to complete this. All we have to do to complete this is add some inner voices. So we can rewrite this so that the stems are all pointing up for the soprano, stems down for the bass, and then we'll fill in the inner voices, the alto and the tenor.